Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and today we're taking a look at the Great War Western Front, the brand new strategy game centered around the First World War that'll absolutely crush you if you're not at the top of your game. To help you get there, thanks to an early access key sent to me by the developers, I've collected a set of essential tips that should help regardless of which side you're fighting for, regardless of which battlefield you're fighting on, and regardless of how familiar you are with the genre. Most of what you hear and see in this video goes beyond the in-game tutorial, so there should be something for everyone here. If you have any tips or pointers of your own, feel free to share them in the comments down below, and if you have any questions, ask away, and I'll answer all I can. Now with no more time to waste and with timestamps down below, let's begin. Recon First. Knowledge is power, and in the Great War Western Front, you'll have a few ways in which you can obtain battlefield intel before and during an engagement. On the campaign map, you'll be able to use intel gathering missions to know exactly what troops and structures the enemy is taking advantage of within a region. While the Allies start with region intel unlocked, the Central Powers need to research the appropriate technology to unlock it, and both need to research the more useful Army intel before they can take advantage of it, at least with the 1914 start dates. Both of these options are available for use when you select a friendly hex, and they allow you to know what the enemy has waiting for you in all adjacent enemy hexes. The region intel action gives you information about enemy buildings, and the Army intel action tells you what troops you can expect to find if you engage them. Your first use of an intel action will always succeed in any given turn, but each subsequent use will be more and more likely to fail, and once you do fail, you won't be able to perform an intel action again until the following turn. These missions are a great way to prepare yourself for the battles ahead, maneuvering the right troops on your side to secure a victorious assault or a capable defensive line. Once you actually engage in battle, you'll want to keep a track of what troops are actually active at any given time and where. For that, you'll need observation balloons. They come with a hefty supply price tag on the battlefield, but they make a world of difference to the battle. During the deployment phase, you'll be able to place these balloons in the same areas you can place trenches and other equipment. Make sure to place them far enough ahead to take advantage of their effective radius, but try not to leave them entirely undefended either, as they can be quickly ignited and destroyed by advancing enemy troops. You'll want to make sure a machine gun nest or two or trench is nearby to gun down enemies who do try to harm your balloon, and you might even prioritize barbed wires in front of the balloon to slow the enemy down specifically at those points so you're able to keep your recon equipment safe. Barbed wire requires additional research though, so appropriately placed guns should do the trick in the meanwhile. Secure placement aside, you'll want to make sure you lift your balloons when the battle actually starts. Without this, you won't gain access to the recon benefits they actually provide, and you'll have wasted supplies placing them on the battlefield. With that said, you'll want to lower your balloons when the enemy sends aircraft to gun them down. While this is a relatively rare occurrence early on, you should always be prepared for the possibility. Lowered balloons don't grant vision, and unfortunately, you can't give individual orders to your balloons. They're either all up or all down. Once destroyed, however that might happen, these balloons are permanently lost for the battle, limiting your vision and making it harder to plan your assaults. While you can charge and fire blindly at enemy trenches and at no man's land, each artillery barrage costs supplies, and you'll soon run out if you're firing away with abandon. Knowing where to shoot and where you might find gaps is essential to preserving your supplies and your momentum on the battlefield. And while these balloons might not be the flashiest or loudest pieces of equipment available to you, they can at times single-handedly make or break a battle. It's also a good idea to prioritize balloon, trench, and defensive structure placement over unit acquisition when deploying for a battle. You'll get some supplies when the battle begins, and while reinforcing units are available at a higher supply cost once the battle starts, it's impossible to place additional balloons, trenches, machine gun nests, and even artillery after the battle begins. Prioritize all the tools at your disposal appropriately so you're not left with empty trenches or unsupported infantry. Force concentration. On the campaign map, any given hex needs to see multiple victories by the aggressor over back-to-back turns in order to actually push the line forward. The number of victories needed to turn ownership of a hex over is indicated by the stars, with stars depleting one by one as each great victory is had. As you can imagine then, focusing on a single hex from multiple angles is a great way to break through the enemy line. Move your troops accordingly, ensuring you can keep the pressure up and that you don't find yourself at a standstill when the opportunity to push through presents itself. Aside from that, the amount of supply available to you in any given battle is at least partly determined by the number of units present in the attacking or defending hex. That means having a larger stack in a single hex has added benefits, though a single hex can only attack once per turn, which is a good reason to spread the troops out for the aforementioned multiple attacks per turn. There's good reason for either approach. Choose yours based on circumstances. This idea of focusing on a specific area goes beyond the campaign map too. It applies, albeit differently, on the battlefield. First off, you must make note of how essential supplies are on the battlefield. Without supplies, you will not be able to bring in reinforcements, you won't be able to fire artillery shells, and you won't be able to bring in air support or really win, truth be told. Make sure to purchase supplies using your gold reserves whenever you're running low, and prioritize the research of storage tents and their associated upgrades, as well as the construction of the storage depot buildings and the upgrades they unlock. These will increase the amount of supply you have access to in battles involving units situated in that hex. Normally, available supply is tied to how many troops are on the hex, as stated earlier, but the supply depot and its upgrades will supplement those baseline numbers. Keep in mind though, your global supply is being drawn from for these individual battles, and so if your global supply is low, you'll find yourself limited in battle. Second, it's important to note that outside of the most desperate or most certain of situations, your infantry should never charge across the battlefield without support. Whether this involves crossing no man's land, the vast expanse between your lines and the enemy's, or it involves simply hopping from one trench over to another deep in enemy territory, you should always be ready to support an infantry push with artillery support at the very least. Tanks can provide some punching power and can help with a push, and air support can come in handy just ahead of a push to eliminate enemy machine gun nests and to soften them up, but by and large, you'll be using your artillery and infantry in tandem to get the job done. Artillery comes in two major flavors, heavy and light. In the mid-game, they start to differentiate from each other more and more with different kinds of munitions available for research. Only heavy artillery can perform gas attacks, for example, and only heavy artillery has access to airburst. Meanwhile, light artillery has exclusive access to rolling barrages and smoke shots, provided they've been researched. Both of these types of equipment have their role to play on the battlefield, with rolling barrages able to provide cover to troops as they advance, and gas attacks typically forcing the enemy to surrender a position unless they're properly equipped. Before you get there though, you start with a regular barrage for both. But even here, there's a difference. As you can see on screen right now, though the light artillery's suppression barrage does less damage than the heavy artillery, it has a significantly shorter cooldown time, meaning you can use it more often than the heavy artillery in a given time span. It's also cheaper to fire as far as supply costs are concerned, if only marginally. This means that as far as suppressing enemy fire is concerned, light artillery is more cost-effective and more readily available. Keep this in mind when choosing who to open fire with, since timing is key here. Firing with your heavy artillery a little too early can result in your infantry being left out in the open and under fire, while firing your light artillery a little too early is relatively easy to recover from. Either way, these big guns will have limited areas of effect, so you'll need a few of them to actually suppress a section of the enemy's trench network and their machine guns, which is why it's important to invest in artillery pieces during deployment, even if that means limiting how much infantry you start with. Don't start the battle with 0 infantry, naturally, but you definitely don't want to start with just 1 or 2 pieces of artillery either. Because of the relatively small area of effect from these suppression barrages, you'll really want to work on focusing your offensive efforts at specific sections of the enemy's lines. This will allow just a few artillery units to shut down a few firing trenches and nearby machine gun nests, all as your infantry pushes up in great numbers. Rather than spreading your lines and artillery support thin, try to significantly outnumber the enemy at one location, pummel said location with artillery fire, and then advance as said pummeling is happening, preventing the enemy from shooting back while also causing them damage, however marginal. There will be lulls in the artillery fire, which is why you want a surplus of your own troops advancing. Many will die despite your best efforts, and the fighting in the trenches can be quite deadly, especially if a mistimed artillery barrage causes friendly fire. Enemy artillery will also be causing damage as you approach the enemy line, so even if you suppress every enemy infantry unit, chances are you'll still take a beating. Later in the game, as you unlock bombers and additional pieces of equipment, You can use them to cause damage to enemy lines ahead of time or to bring in air support that's particularly good at shutting down reinforced MG nests. But whatever tools you might have at your disposal, the more numbers you dedicate to a push, the more likely you are to break through and actually survive after arriving at the enemy trenches. And since you can only have a limited number of troops on the battlefield at any given time, force concentration is key to overwhelming the enemy and breaking through. Securing points along the edge of the map will then allow you to bring in reinforcements behind what used to be enemy lines, and if you carefully advance from trench to trench with supporting fire, you'll find yourself enveloping the enemy in no time. When defending against an enemy attack, using force concentration is equally important, as are defense in-depth tactics. Try to layer your trenches so the loss of a trench up front doesn't give the enemy immediate access, and easy access especially, to your entire network, forcing them to emerge if they want to advance to your second or third layer. Fire artillery barrages at advancing enemies to slow them down and suppress them as they move forward, allowing your own troops more time to fire back. Use barbed wire and razor wire to slow enemy infantry down too, further allowing your troops and MG nests to have a field day. Place those MG nests a bit further back so they don't get eliminated as soon as the enemy gets close to your forward trenches. And don't hesitate to reposition. Don't hesitate to surrender, and don't hesitate to bring in reinforcements as needed. Ideally, all of that using comms trenches to stay in cover as your troops move quickly from firing trench to firing trench. Many will die in the Great War, and you need to make sure there's a new soldier to replace a fallen one at all times. Maintain national will. This is a grim time as people die by the thousands, and with the front lines barely moving at the best of times, national will plays a major role in the game. Whichever side sees their national will reach zero first will immediately lose, regardless of the situation at the front. Though there are campaign map events and side objectives that can boost or lower national will at times, the biggest contributor is going to be battles. The victor of a battle receives a boost to their national will, while the loser takes a hit. But the scale of these additions and subtractions to national will are determined by just how well or poorly the battle went. The scale goes from great victory to great loss, with quite a few steps in between, and sometimes you'll need to accept less than a great victory to simply make a dent in enemy national will, while at other times you'll just want to try and avoid a worse loss to minimize damage to your own. Auto-resolving a battle will give you the game's best guess as to how things will turn out. Sometimes it'll be a little off, and that's working as intended. But when fighting battles yourself, you'll have a bit more fine-tuned control over how things play out. Remember that when playing the campaign, you can always ask for and receive a ceasefire to end the fighting right away, using the current state of the battle as the final result. If you don't do that, your other option is to fight to the bitter end, either when the battle timer runs out or until all capture points have been taken. The reason why I highlight the ceasefire option is because, as I alluded to before, sometimes stretching a battle out in an attempt to get a better result might actually end up doing the opposite. The bar at the top here shows the victory and loss scale, and the little marker in this bar shows the current state of the battle, shifting left and right to reflect evolving circumstances. Each unit that has been wiped or routed will shift this marker, as will each captured or lost trench, each destroyed asset such as MG nests, and more. You'll see notifications with regards to what's causing these shifts, and as you might imagine, this means a slight miscalculation can quickly flip the state of the battle from one segment to another. Similarly though, a well-calculated push can do the same in your favor, but that's a calculated risk that you have to, well, calculate. You'll want to fight tooth and nail on the defensive to prevent the loss of trenches, taking them back should it happen, and you'll want to make sure the enemy isn't able to take their own trenches back once you've captured them. This is particularly true for the more high-value trenches, such as the command trench. You'll also want to tell troops with low health or low morale to withdraw. This safely extracts them from the battlefield without shifting the battle in either direction, and while an individual unit might not seem all that impactful when saved, the numbers quickly add up. You have plenty of fresh reinforcements to bring in, provided you have the supplies on hand, so make sure to use them. Don't get too focused on capturing points just for the sake of capturing points, though they will give a huge boost to the battle result in your favor when you manage it, and don't be too hell-bent on getting a great victory every time you fight a battle. Sometimes it's enough to get a few back-to-back minor victories just to chip away at the enemy's national will while boosting your own. And let's not forget that losses, in terms of units and soldiers, need to all be replenished after a battle, and that will be a bigger and bigger hit to your gold reserves the more losses you take. Keep an eye on this marker, and be prepared to call for a ceasefire to minimize the impact to your side of the war. Yes, sometimes this can mean sacrificing a risky chance at a better tier of win, but there's no feeling quite like snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. But hopefully the tips in this video will bring you nothing but great victory after great victory, preserving your national will, keeping your boys alive as much as possible, and crushing your enemies all at the same time. If you have any pointers of your own you'd like to share, fire away in the comments below, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask and I'll answer all that I can. If you found this video helpful, consider leaving a like and a comment down below, and don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel for more strategy gaming reviews, previews, guides, let's plays, and more. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big old thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.